Richard, this is an extraordinary story. You've got the National Education Union, the NEU, saying the situation is absolutely disgraceful. There's going to be massive disruption to children's education because, aside from the danger that they're having to close these schools because it's dangerous, they're actually saying what we're going to do is have remote learning.
Yes.
Now, where did we hear that before? Well, what damage did it do?
Huge damage to the education of children and, of course, massive disruption for parents who are trying to get to work, trying to deal with the cost of living crisis. So the impact will be just humongous, going, as I say, through parents, families, businesses, in particular impact on small businesses. All of a sudden, parents have got to try and educate people at home online. I mean, this really is... Let's hope the number of schools can be minimised. Let's try and look for some positives. But what I would fear is that there'll now be sort of a general panic everywhere, and there's got to be some very rapid assessment of where there genuinely is risk and where there isn't.
I mean, the government said any schools confirmed to have reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete, known as RAAC, a weak form implicated in a school roof collapse in 2018, could not open without mitigations and may have to teach online or in alternative buildings. I mean, it seems incredible to me that they've known about this for this length of time. The Times has also found, it's on the front page of the Times today, first warnings about this substance have been cracking in roofs came as early as 1995. So we're talking like 28 years ago. What the hell are they thinking?
Well, that is the point, isn't it? What were they thinking? Where was the preventative? Where was the clear sort of... You're supposed to have a planned preventative programme for maintenance. That's what most buildings have, whether it's public sector or private sector. I know a few of things.
I mean, do you know much about this particular form
this
of
actually is a new one on me.
Yeah.
And it's quite often the case that in construction you come up with new techniques and you say this is cheaper and it'll last for X period of time.
Right.
Look, that's all fine as long as you remember when you get to the end of the lifespan, you've then actually got to have a plan for what to do with it thereafter.
And there couldn't have been any plan really for this, because if you build a building with something which starts failing after a particular period of time, the building becomes useless, doesn't it?
Completely useless. So you've then got to have a plan to replace it, to take down the ceiling or the wall or whatever. Right. So, yes, there will be, I think, a lot of deep anxiety everywhere. And you can understand parents saying, what's the implication for my school, this school? And I'm afraid that you're going to have certain elements of the teaching unions will of course, be, they will be ramping this up to an ever greater scale. Yeah. But, you know, for children, the key thing is, for children, the damage to their education if they've got to go back online. Let's hope that actually some construction firms, project managers can rapidly get in and assess those that are genuinely in danger that need to be propped up, where you need to move out, bring in some porta cabins. And in fairness, there are actually, trying to be positive about this, you can rapidly bring in porta cabin classrooms and things in order to get people back, children and teachers back into schools.
Well, my son's school, funnily enough, was being reconstructed over the last 2 or 3 years, in fact, for most of the time that he was in the high school, they were in a porta cabin of one kind or another. And so schools do that. They can do that. But according to the Times, of those who have received warnings, as many as 30 are being told that they must close entirely and move pupils to portable classrooms, other schools, empty buildings, or even revert to online learning. So there's something like 600-odd schools implicated in this, but they'll only have to close bits of them, apparently. Yeah,
and as I say, let's hope that they can get some rapid progress in bringing in portable classrooms, in essentially sort of closing off those areas that might be at risk, so that you can keep children in different parts. But obviously some schools have got more space to do that than others.
Yeah.
If it's a city centre school, it just may not have the space.
No.
So every school will be slightly different, and there will be a huge programme of work. But it's a chaotic start to
so, I mean, if you're a parent
year.
and you've got kids going back to school, I'd love to hear from you, because you'll know, obviously, if your school that your children are going to is in any way in danger, and if so, what have they told you, and where have they said you're supposed to send the children?
But schools ministers like Nick Gibb, I mean, he's been a schools minister of varying forms for many, many years under this Conservative regime. So he's got some serious questions to ask about what the DfE knew when, and who was doing what about it. And he needs to explain himself and the department's failings.
Yeah, he absolutely does. And meanwhile, of course, we've got a new couple of ministers in government. By the way, if you are going to get in touch with us, here's the number, 0344 499 1000. Love to know what's going on with your new school year, if anything, in terms of this concrete problem that we've got. Two ministers on the front pages. Grant Shapps, front page of the Guardian, the new Secretary of State for Defence, and then, even more unbelievably, the new Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero, Claire Coutinho. And there she is on the front page of the Times, looking very smug. Nobody knows who she is.
No one's ever heard of her, frankly. She's only been an MP for 4 years. It turns out she's a very close friend of the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. She went to Oxford.
Used to be his advisor or something, right?
Well, she went to Oxford. She worked for a bunch of think tanks. And she's been a great advocate of lots of net zero issues, green issues. She even she wanted to rename September Green Timber. Has anybody heard of Green Timber?
I've never heard of it.
Well, I hadn't either, but apparently it's
doesn't
a
really
thing.
work for me, though.
It doesn't work for me,
No.
but so she's completely down the whole sort of green rabbit hole, it seems to me.
I mean, like, you've got Rocktober works, right? That's when you've got rock music in October. Movember's good. You know, that's mustachioed men raising money for charity in November. Was it Green Timber?
No, it's no good. It's not doing it for me.
If that's the best she can come up with, I think we might as well get rid of her now.
Well,
you know, thanks very much, Claire.
I'm not that enthused or encouraged, frankly. There's a desperate attempt to say that she might try and row back on some of the madness of the costs of net zero, but I'm not buying that at all. I think actually it's completely the opposite. I think she's completely down the whole net zero rabbit hole.
Well, I was listening to an MP last night on First Edition who said that on Tuesday of next week there's a bill going through the House, I think, which is about controlling the costs of certain net zero things. I think it's some of the backbenchers from the Tory party who are trying to push for, you know, a slowing down of the net zero commitments and a kind of guarantee that people are not going to be out of pocket for whatever reason. So she's going to have to get right on top of that brief straight away and answer some tough questions.
Well, it'll be very interesting, but we know what'll happen. Yeah. She will spout the usual Tory propaganda about, you know, yes, we're heading towards net zero, we're absolutely committed to it, and the truth is that it's hurting people. It's hurting people every day, and they can't get away from the KPMG report, which says that net zero will cost every household in this country for at least the next decade an extra £1,000 post-tax. Yeah. This is serious cash, and they need to do something about it. I'm not interested in waffle, in talk, in spin. Oh, yes, we're concerned about it. I want action. I want decisions. I want some of this madness stopped, and stop now before it causes any more damage. And, of course, the whole Ulez catastrophe that's going on at the moment is just one function of this. Yes. And it's in a sense, it's utterly extraordinary, but you are seeing now the consequences of that.
But it sort of focuses the mind on a policy which nobody wants and which basically is going to cost everybody a lot more money. And that pretty much sums up the whole net zero nonsense. And Sadiq Khan keeps trying to make out that it's not actually about net zero, it's about clean air. Well, it's not actually about either. It's about him raising a load of money from people who are already tapped out.
Absolutely right, because the truth is that when the Imperial College scientists, they said that actually looking at the data, that the Ulez extension would make no difference to air pollution.
Yeah, they didn't like that. So
he didn't like that. His deputy tried to sort of fudge and fiddle the words. Oh, and by the way, here's another contract for another 800 grand over the next couple of years. Yeah. If you can sort of toe the line, please.
It's like the old Henny Youngman joke, isn't it? He said, I went to the doctor, he gave me 6 months to live. 6 months later, I said, I can't pay the bill. He gave me another 6 months. You know, that's what it's like. You know, these people are charlatans. They are absolutely pulling the wool over everybody's eyes. They're doing it for money. They paid 800,000 quid to the Imperial College group who came up with this rubbish, right? And when they came up with the wrong opinion, they, oh, don't worry, you can have another opinion. And that's how it went. We're going to talk more about Grant Shapps, more about the rail strike, more about the doctors' strike, and this concrete collapse is unbelievable. I mean, surely they should have just grown some more. Welcome back to the Independent Republican Mike Graham right here on TalkTV. Richard Tice is here. We'll take your calls coming up as well on a whole range of subjects. 0344 499 1000. Grant Shapps, though, let's go back to him, Richard, because all I heard yesterday, Greg Clark came out, another sort of anonymous minister, I don't even know what he's a minister of, or he might not even be one anymore, talking about what a great experienced minister Grant Shapps is. You know, he's been a minister since, you know, 2010 or something like this. I can't think of one thing that he's done that you would say, what is Grant Shapps famous for?
Exactly. Nothing. He's had more jobs than most of us had hot dinners in the last literally year.
He was Home Secretary for 6 days in that sort of turbulent period.
He's been a cabinet minister of 5 different departments in 1 year. Look, you know when he comes on, basically, that you're going to hear a load of spin. He sounds very good and very positive and all that, fine. But where's the action? Where's the do? Yeah. Let's just remind people, this is the bloke that said back in February 2021, I think it's January 21, that the moment that the elderly had been vaccinated, he would be standing on the ramparts with Julia in order to lift lockdowns.
Yes.
And when she challenged him on it, back end of February, all we got was waffle and you know, you can't trust a word that man says.
The only things I remember before is when he was Transport Secretary, he went to Spain on holiday with his family, and while he was in Spain, they announced it was a lockdown and nobody could fly anywhere. And he was the Transport Secretary, didn't know it was coming. And you go, right, that's not great. And then the other one was when I interviewed him once only, and I always tell the same story, when he said to me, well, don't you want Britain to be the world leader in onshore wind? And I went, not really. And he'd never seen anybody ever say that. He was so shocked. I think he sort of had to go and have a lie down. I said, look, no, we're only interested in cheap energy. We're interested in a decently run and home-produced energy. And apart from that, nobody cares.
But here's the point. Defence is a huge brief. And Ben Wallace, I think, has probably been the best Defence Secretary that any of us can remember. He's done it for 4 years. That's the longest Conservative Defence Secretary since Winston Churchill. That's a remarkable thing.
Yeah.
But you have to know what you're doing. And to learn this brief, if you've never been in the armed forces, you've got no experience in security whatsoever, which Grant Shapps hasn't got any of that, would take many, many months. And the reality is there were some very good experienced candidates, the likes of James Heappey, but instead Sunak's gone for, guess what? Another mate,
well, even Tom
another loyalty, a yes man.
Tom Tugendhat's been in the armed forces. He could have done it. I know that people might have said that you know the Veterans Minister might not be quite ready for it. But as you say, there were plenty of people. But what this tells you about Rishi Sunak, though, is he wants to appoint people to very important jobs, ministries of state, which used to be a very respected position. I mean, who's going to respect Grant Shapps wandering in?
He's just appointing
to a NATO meeting, for example.
Exactly. I mean, that's just laughable. Absolutely laughable. The idea of Grant Shapps talking in a strong way about the defence of our nation, the defence, the promotion of NATO against Russia. It's just laughable. When you compare that against Ben Wallace and some of the other potential candidates, he's just appointed his mates to key positions in order to basically protect and say yes sir, no sir.
And once again, it proves it's all about what he thinks it looks like as opposed to what he actually wants to do. He clearly wants to do nothing. I mean, the migrant situation goes from bad to worse. We now see student blocks being commandeered in Huddersfield. They've taken over this block of flats which students have actually got leases for, and the landlord's obviously got better offer from the Home Office, and he's gone with them. I mean, if they're going to start is this now Rishi Sunak's version of we won't be putting them in hotels anymore, we'll just commandeer blocks of flats for them?
It's truly so shocking that it should be deemed appropriate by the government, by the Home Office, by Number 10, that actually the migrants are more important than British citizens who are students, whose families have paid their taxes, and they just treat people with absolute disdain. Essentially, they're sort of making students homeless when they're going to university in favour of these illegals.
Less than a month before, and I'm in the middle of trying to find student accommodation for my own son, and, you know, you can't find it at this time of the year. So if you're one of those parents whose kids are being kicked out in Huddersfield, they're going to really struggle to get any other place to stay, apart from a vast expense, and meanwhile, everybody else is getting rich off it. It's unbelievable. Absolutely outrageous.
It is actually truly outrageous, but there's just a complete lack of foresight, complete lack of delivery on anything, and it's catastrophic. Wherever you go, whichever department, nothing seems to work. And we've now got a defence department that's led by someone who knows nothing about defence. You've got a net zero department, energy department, where you need the crucial thing we need is energy reliability. We need cheap energy.
Claire Coutinho, I understand, is anti-fracking, right? So
that's right. She's anti-fracking. Supposedly Rishi Sunak was pro-fracking. Now he's anti-fracking. Look, the point is we need to use our own energy.
Fracking ridiculous is all I know.
It's fracking ridiculous. That's absolutely right.
You know, what about this other story that there's some kind of cave-in going on in India? Rishi Sunak facing Tory revolt over fears that he could hand India thousands of student visas in return for some kind of bumper trade deal. So in addition to giving them foreign aid, in addition to already granting India many hundreds of thousands of visas for travel and student visas, we've got more people coming on the boats from India now as well. What's going on?
Well, that's right. I mean, why do you need to come on a boat from India if actually you can get a visa from India? That's the first point. I guess
these are the people that can't get visas. Well, they've been turned down for a visa.
Well, but that actually proves the whole thing, that this safe and legal route idea is a complete nonsense. Because if you're turned down from a visa from a safe and legal route, guess what? You get the boat, so you've got to stop the boats, you've got to pick them up and safely take back. Look, we all want more trade, we want more growth,
yeah.
but the price of that should not be a huge increase in visas for low or modestly skilled people, because we need to get our own people back into work. A shocking statistic just out in the last few days is that the number I've been banging on about, the number of people, British people on out-of-work benefits, has risen from 5.2 million to 5.4 million and heading north fast. Again, the government knows about this, doing absolutely zero about it.
Well, they're sort of enabling people to not work, aren't they? I mean, we saw another story this week from the guy who's the head of Amazon saying that working from home is not happening, it's not working. We've seen a story today saying that one of the problems with air traffic control, as it all went belly up the middle of this week, is that a lot of them are working from home. Great, you know, so the guy controlling the sort of joystick of the, you know, what do they used to call them? BA Heavy, the jumbo coming in from Los Angeles. You know, he's sitting in his bedroom in his underpants going, yeah, looks all right to me. Yeah,
I read that story and thought, is it April Fool's Day?
Yeah.
I mean, if anybody needs to be amongst the team, knowing what's going on, sharing concerns, hearing anything, your air traffic controllers need to be surely in the same place. You just can't be doing that from your bedroom, for heaven's sake.
It's just not
You might be
option.
playing Game Boy from your bedroom, but please not looking after the air above.
It's all right for GPs because they can do it. They don't have to bother going to the GP surgery. They're earning £12,000 more a year, but they're seeing fewer patients. So that's because they don't have to turn up. Patients are still not being allowed into surgeries. People tell me that even now, so long after COVID has gone away, you walk into a GP surgery and it's deserted. There's nobody there.
Yeah, and we all know the consequences of that. You've got many, many more people living in the United Kingdom, and yet we've got GPs less face-to-face appointments, much, much harder to see a GP. Story earlier, someone was, I mean, just the time it's taking. And this government thinks, oh, great, we've got a target, 2 weeks to see a GP. Forget it. In Australia, they laugh at you if you say it takes longer than a day, for heaven's sake. So, I mean, the whole thing is, it's a catastrophe. It's so worrying. And so you've got more and more people.
And more people are just at the end of their tether now.
Absolutely,
I
end of
know
their
so
tether.
many people who can't afford to go private with healthcare, but who are just doing it because they know that if they don't, they'll become one of those statistics on the NHS waiting list who actually die waiting.
Exactly. Well, in truth, what's actually happening quietly, and no one wants to talk about it, is healthcare is being privatised because people are so desperate, because the NHS, that all the lefties want to pour yet more money into, is actually failing, and it's failing at every level. There are some, of course, there's some examples of brilliance, but it doesn't need more money, it needs reform, fundamental reform. You've got to stop wasting cash at every level, focus on the front line, patient care.
Absolutely right. Now, your show on Sunday?
Big show on Sunday, yes.
I mean, there's a lot to be getting your teeth into.
There will be plenty to get my teeth into. There will be a sizzling, soaring Sunday sermon.
Tremendous.
There's quite a lot of work going into that at the
Excellent.
moment. So,
there's a lot of preparation.
There's a lot of preparation.
Much more than my show. I make no preparation for my show because I have to do another show before it starts. That's my preparation. But listen, it'll be a great weekend. Fantastic show coming up. Who knows what next week will hold? It's almost impossible to know. But we've got the train strike all weekend. The doctors going on strike as well in September. You know, I don't know if we can we get to Christmas?
Good news, though, it'll be warm next week.
It'll be warm.
So
Brilliant.
maybe that's why they've gone on strike, so they can go on the sun lounger and just enjoy the weather.
Absolutely right. Incredible. Coming up, we're going to speak to Norman Baker, who's a former Transport Minister. Commuters this morning have been slamming. I mean, there's been loads of people here that couldn't get into work. Appalling disruption caused by their journeys because of the rail strikes. More than a dozen companies cancelled all services. And the Circle Line shut down as well because they've got driver shortages. I mean, isn't it time to just take the drivers out of the picture and make the trains automatic?
You don't seem to have strikes on the DLR, the Dockland Light Railway. Guess what? Because it's a driverless train.
Yeah.